Today on Notsam Wrestling, Jacob Fatu strikes with a vengeance upon Braun Strowman. Let's break down the men's and the women's Royal Rumble matches. Timeless Toni Storm is back. That trade window is open, and superstars have left their homes on Raw and SmackDown. This is Notsam Wrestling. Welcome to Notsam Wrestling. And of course, so much going on right now. This Thursday, Indianapolis, Indiana is the place to be. Not only will Notsam Wrestling be live this Thursday at the Helium Comedy Club in Indianapolis, Indiana, but the first women's Intercontinental Champion, Lyra Valkyria, will be with me. You can get your tickets now at notsam.com. And in a wrestling is everywhere reference, scenario, acknowledgement, I'm sitting there, right? It's late night, Saturday night. Watch Saturday night's main event. Did the immediate reaction podcast with Megan Morant, which you can see after this podcast is done on the Notsam Wrestling podcast feed, as well as the Notsam Wrestling YouTube channel. Back upstairs, edits done, exports done, we're all good. NBC is still raging on my television screen. Saturday Night Live is on. And as the credits roll and the cast says goodbye, what do I see but SNL cast member Bowen Yang in a New Japan Pro Wrestling t-shirt? Okay, we've already been on the case as far as Vanessa Hudgens go and getting her on Notsam Wrestling. I need to find out if this Bowen Yang is a wrestling superfan to the extent that he's wearing New Japan merchandise on SNL, because if that is the case, we have some things to talk about. So let's find out. Is he the superfan that he appears to be? This is all very exciting, but it's a very, very exciting time in this world of pro wrestling. It's the time for Jacob Fatu. Look, my highlight, now that we're removed from Saturday night's main event, was absolutely Jacob Fatu's presentation from start to finish. The hype. I mean, when you look, just looking at the Saturday night's main event card, right? You have the Women's World Championship match between Rhea Ripley and Nia Jax. You've got which is Rhea Ripley's first real non-Judgment Day, non-Liv Morgan thing, big title defense since becoming the champion. It's her reintroduction as Women's World Champion. You've got Sheamus versus Braun Breaker, Intercontinental Championship match. Not only is this an Intercontinental Championship match, but this is Sheamus and the story of the Intercontinental Championship being the only prize in the WWE that Sheamus has yet to win. You got the World Heavyweight Championship where Gunther is defending against Jey Uso. And then only the fourth match on there's a 4-match show. And that final match is Jacob Fatu versus Braun Strowman. No titles, no nothing. It tells you everything you need to know about how important this new introduction of Jacob Fatu to the WWE audience is, to Jacob, to the WWE, to everybody. From the way Jacob was presented from start to finish, not only was he elevated, but those around him were elevated. I'm talking about the hype leading to the match throughout the night. I'm talking about the promo. I'm talking about the entrance. I'm talking about the match. I'm talking about the aftermath. I'm talking about everything, details in each of those instances, putting Jacob Fatu on this pedestal to the point that even Tama Tonga came across as a bigger star than he has since he showed up after WrestleMania to be a part of this new bloodline with Solo Sikoa, where he's still doing the yeah, but there's an acknowledgement of what it is. There's an acknowledgement of him saying, I'm going to get everyone to say this. It's not just some weird half animal, half human being cartoon. It was almost like we were watching the new bloodline and watching these guys under Solo Sikoa, judging them as if this was the final product, when in actuality, that was all just foundation laying for what this run appears like it's going to be, especially for Jacob Fatu. I mean, the fact that, like, there was a time when Jacob Fatu was tearing it up on the indies, when he was tearing it up in MLW, and people would say things for real, not part of a storyline, like, he would be so good in WWE, but, with his past and prison time and the murkiness of everything that went on, I just don't know if WWE would ever want to touch that. Now, not only are they touching it, but, and really, like, they've made reference to the fact that he's maybe served some jail time before. But Saturday was really the first time where in his introduction, Michael Cole laid it all out. 3 stints in prison before he was 18. After that, he was sleeping on a mattress on the streets, like really painting the picture of who this person is, warts and all. And the fact that that defines him and explains what his behavior in the match is going to be. When I talk about details, that's what I'm talking about. Why, for most people, is a disqualification almost like a saving grace, right? Usually that disqualification finish is used when it's like, well, we want to give this guy the victory, but we don't want to have the other guy lose. So maybe we'll do a disqualification thing and save it for a rematch or something like that. That's not what this was. Because even though Jacob lost the match technically by disqualification, pinning Braun Strowman would not have made him appear to be Braun's superior more than what he actually did to Braun Strowman. And I think that losing that match technically on the records, when the graphic came up, that's technically what it said, but that's not what the takeaway is. And if anything, that pays off what Michael Cole said during Jacob's entrance, which is he's attracted to wrestling because they'll pay him to do stuff that he would have been locked up and was locked up for doing. And so it shouldn't look like a traditional wrestling match. There should be no catch as catch can. The referee should have a very difficult time keeping Jacob Fatu in line. And this is the foundation that we've been given for months, by the way. This idea that Jacob Fatu, the reason he wasn't ever a member of the bloodline under Roman Reigns, was not because, I hadn't heard about this guy. Was not because, I guess I knew he was around, but I didn't know he was a wrestler. It was because they knew exactly who Jacob Fatu was. And they knew how unpredictable he was. They knew how uncontrollable he was, and they couldn't have him there. And while we saw Jacob Fatu as a beast in the build-up to this, while Solo Sikoa was leading his bloodline, we never truly saw this thing that was too much of a risk, that could not be controlled until Saturday night's main event. Jacob coming to the ring with that necklace on. It wasn't an Ulafala, because it was more of a, the flowered necklace, but it was red and black. And I don't know what the meaning behind it was, but I doubt that it was simply decorative, because it doesn't strike me as Jacob's style. Clearly, there's a meaning there. And Jacob is taking charge in a different way. And it makes me wonder, how soon is Jacob going to come for Roman Reigns? And it's not going to be about, I'm the tribal chief, you're the tribal chief. It's going to be about, I'm here for everything. I'm going to take what's yours. And then after I take what's yours, Roman Reigns, I'm going to go take what's his. I'm going to take what's his. This is what I do. Why? Because it's my instinct. It's just who I am as a human being. This is what fuels me. I think, but I also feel like the Solo Sikoa thing has to happen before the Roman Reigns thing happens. I don't feel, and we'll talk about this in a moment, I don't think, it could be Roman versus Jacob as your match at WrestleMania. It's possible for sure. But I don't think we'll be there by WrestleMania. The Royal Rumble is already this week. I don't think we'll be ready for Jacob versus Roman by WrestleMania, because Jacob and Solo, we don't know where that stands. Jacob has not flat out said, I'm doing this now because Solo can't handle it. What's happened is Solo left, and Jacob has just decided to do what Jacob does. And now there's not even that thing of Solo being there. It'll be very interesting because, as we talked about last week, this idea of Jacob being a villain is tough for a lot of people to comprehend. I think it's even more difficult now that you've listened to the crowd in San Antonio chanting one more time, that you've listened to them after he's decimated Braun Strowman, chanting Fatu, Fatu, Fatu. And that's all fair, and that's all good, and that's all worth talking about. Frankly, that's why we're talking about it. But I do think that you have to remember that when Bronson Reed was similar to this, I think Jacob Fatu has a different style about the way he does it. And one day, by the way, the fact that they were on that same War Games team, we said this in November. The idea of Jacob and Bronson as a tag team is so appealing. The idea of them fighting each other, maybe even more. And that's a very fun thing about all this, by the way, is that Jacob has been so locked in to this whole bloodline saga that his interaction with members of the roster outside of the bloodline, even though he's been in the WWE for months, has been minimal. So now we're still sitting there going, can you imagine when Jacob and Braun Breaker finally get their hands on each other? Can you imagine Jacob and Sheamus? When we were talking about Penta showing up on Raw, people, oh, can you imagine Jacob and Penta? All of this stuff, months in. It's taken us months, and it's becoming a reality. And it doesn't feel like, why wouldn't we have had this already? It's because we've got this slow burn approach to storytelling where everything has room to breathe. And when everything has room to breathe, it gives meaning to the stuff that deserves to have meaning. But to go back to Bronson Reed, people, when he was dropping tsunamis on R-Truth, on Seth Rollins, on all these people, the fans were chanting one more time. The fans were cheering because it was such a spectacle that that's going to happen every time. But ultimately, in the era that we're in WWE, what's been my experience and my observation is that fans right now are willing to go with the story. And for a long time, fans refused. They refused. They would not boo the bad guys, and they would not cheer the good guys. They were willing to do the opposite, but they wouldn't do it. For a long time on this podcast, years ago, our first, I think, catchphrase before the 3 rules, before watch the product, before speculate wildly, before everything counts, it was boo the bad guys. And the reason that existed is because at that time, no one was booing the bad guys. In fact, the only people that would get boos were the big baby faces. Just because it was the audience's way of saying, look, we love wrestling and we're here, but we don't love this story. This is not a compelling story. When the story is compelling, people cheer the good guys and boo the bad guys. And I think you've got a scenario where that can happen with Jacob Fatu. That because that, I think eventually that good guy turn will happen. But I think, for instance, when Jacob Fatu is in the ring with an LA Knight, for example, people will cheer LA Knight and boo Jacob Fatu. And it's not because they dislike Jacob Fatu. It's because they're into the story. And they're into these characters. I think Solo Sikoa and Jacob Fatu, the challenge more becomes not how do you get people to boo Jacob Fatu. The challenge becomes how do you get people, what's the story that you tell that gets people to cheer for Solo Sikoa? Because if people, I think, feel like that character deserves to be cheered, I believe they will cheer him. But you've got to convince the audience that he deserves to be cheered. And I don't, quite frankly, know how you do it. Unless it's a beatdown and Roman and the Usos help Solo. And Roman and the Usos forgive Solo. And maybe they don't restart the bloodline, they just forgive him. And you have this moment of, okay, we love the Usos. We love Roman. If they're co-signing with Solo, I can cheer for Solo. Now, I think there's also going to be a thing where most of us know, like, they're going to have to rebuild Solo into the badass that he was in the bloodline. Because right now, nobody thinks he's got a prayer against somebody like Jacob Fatu. So those are the 2 hurdles, I think, to get past when you're building up to what I can only imagine is an inevitability. And I would think would be the first big rivalry for Jacob Fatu, which is Jacob versus Solo Sikoa. But who knows? I mean, stranger things have happened. I also found it interesting that the build of Jacob Fatu was centered around just him absolutely decimating and destroying Braun Strowman and just leaving him in a heap, a bloody mess. And the more I thought about it, the more I was like, this is the best wrestling can be. This is as poetic as you can possibly be, because when Braun Strowman comes out and you hear that roar over the PA, why do we instantly respond? Because Braun Strowman was elevated so high at his peak. And how did Braun Strowman get elevated that high? He instantly went out there and killed people. First, it was the, local talents that went to the ring and got completely run over by Braun Strowman, the James Ellsworths of the world. And Braun Strowman did such a good job destroying people, it made somebody like James Ellsworth famous. But then, how did Braun Strowman get to the level where he was like world champion caliber? He destroyed Roman Reigns. Peak Braun Strowman. He went on a killing spree against Roman Reigns, whether it was tipping over ambulances, whether it was throwing him off very, very, very high objects, whatever it was. Braun Strowman got to where he got by leaving Roman Reigns bloodied and broken in a heap and standing tall and looking uncontrollable. And years later, Braun Strowman now repays that favor to the wrestling gods and to the Samoan family themselves by sharing the ring with Roman Reigns' cousin, Jacob Fatu, and having Jacob Fatu do to Braun Strowman exactly what Braun Strowman did to Roman Reigns for the exact same result towards Jacob Fatu. People went nuts for Braun Strowman when he destroyed Roman Reigns. And now people are going nuts for Jacob Fatu when he destroys Braun Strowman. It's cyclical, baby. This is how the wrestling business is supposed to work. It's kind of a beautiful thing. But I also think it's Jacob Fatu right now is just such a shining example of how stories are told in the WWE in this era, where there's a reason for all this stuff. And by the way, whether that reason is even known at the time, who's to say? I can't tell you that there's always a grand plan. I think that there are certainly possibly times when something is thought of, it's like, oh yeah, we did do that back then. Let's kind of include that nugget into what we're doing here and tie it all together. But I don't care if you do it purposely or you retcon it or whatever, as long as it makes sense and as long as it feels deserved. There's a reason why Jacob Fatu came in with Paul Heyman, hyping him the way Paul Heyman was. Paul Heyman was on Logan Paul's podcast, Impulsive, and he was talking about booking Logan Paul, and he said, if it were me booking you for WrestleMania 41, I wouldn't book you for WrestleMania 41. I wouldn't figure out who's your opponent for WrestleMania 41. I'd go to WrestleMania 42 and honestly wouldn't even do that. I'd figure out who your opponent is at WrestleMania 43 because I don't want to put myself into this situation where Logan Paul is this 18-month superstar. We've conditioned the audience to embrace long-term storytelling and the fact that it works. So I'd go to WrestleMania 43 and work backwards. Why was Paul Heyman so adamant about making it clear that Jacob Fatu was who Jacob Fatu is in the spring of last year? It's because he knew we would eventually get to the point where we are today, where all that is coming to fruition. Why was Paul Heyman so adamant about the fact that Jacob Fatu was a beast, was an unstoppable monster that the original bloodline wanted nothing to do with because he was too scary? Why, after all the months that Jacob Fatu has been in the WWE, why have solo matches with Jacob Fatu? And I don't mean solo Sikoa matches. I mean, Why has Jacob Fatu had so few singles matches? Why has he done so little outside of Solo Sikoa and Bloodline business? Why were Jacob Fatu's promos so slow to roll out? Those entrance promos that he does, he didn't start those right away. Why was he only saying a couple words here, a couple words there, a couple more words here, a couple more words there, and slowly rolled out? It's I think, because we would get to where we are today, and all that foundation has been laid. And then you can almost just click the on switch on, and it's time to tell your story, because all the character work has been done. So now he can go out there and destroy Braun Strowman, and there's just rich foundation under that absolute destruction. Now, I was talking about Roman Reigns and Jacob Fatu, and why, of course, we will get there. But why we may not, I don't believe that there's time to get there before WrestleMania. It doesn't feel like that's the pace at which we're moving, and it doesn't feel like that's the pace that we need to move at. It certainly doesn't match Mr. Heyman's philosophy on things. It doesn't seem to match Triple H's philosophy on things, and I don't know why you would spend, 6-7 months building up Jacob Fatu's character to the point where this match would mean this much, only to rush 3 months to get to him to have his WrestleMania match with Roman Reigns. The math doesn't math for me there. Doesn't add up. I think that what we're going to see with Jacob Fatu is more of a Brock Lesnar scenario. I don't think that this is the beginning of the Jacob Fatu top guy run yet. I think we're basically looking at a process that is a couple of steps. Well, it's a 3-step process that finishes after about a year of Jacob being in the WWE. I think step 1 is laying all this bloodline foundation and who this guy is. I think step 2 is where we're at now. Step 2 basically started at Saturday night's main event, which is, this is what Jacob looks like without the bloodline. This is truly how dangerous and unhinged Jacob Fatu actually is. I think step 3 is now Jacob Fatu is officially in that upper echelon. Now Jacob Fatu is entering into top guy territory. I think that here's who Jacob is post being under Solo Sikoa is your WrestleMania season. I think Jacob starts the true chapter 3 build to top guy status right after WrestleMania. I think the year between WrestleMania 41 and 42 is going to be the year that establishes Jacob Fatu as the top dog. And that's why I think by the time we get to WrestleMania 42, we should have a scenario where the audience is realistically looking at Jacob Fatu. And who knows, he may be a babyface by then. You just have to kind of go with the wave of where the audience is. But I think by the time you get to WrestleMania 42 is when you're actually going to be able to say, maybe Jacob Fatu is the guy. This shouldn't just be an opponent for Roman Reigns. This should be a threat to Roman Reigns. This should be a threat to Cody Rhodes. Right now, Jacob Fatu is a terrifying opponent for Roman Reigns, is a terrifying opponent for Cody Rhodes. But he hasn't established what is needed to establish for us as an audience to say, no, he is a threat to the legacy. No. Not only is he going to beat Cody Rhodes or beat Roman Reigns, but he's going to take their spot. And we need to believe that that's possible. And I think that that's the story that is told post WrestleMania 41, heading towards WrestleMania 42. And who knows if it'll be Roman and Cody by that point. Maybe there's somebody else building right under it. Maybe by the time we get to Braun Breaker versus Jacob Fatu, Braun Breaker is ready to enter into that territory. Maybe Bronson Reed has something else to say about it. Maybe there's a lot of possibilities. But all I'm saying is I don't think Jacob Fatu is becoming a top guy right now. I think Jacob Fatu is on the road to becoming a top guy. And the Raw or the SmackDown after WrestleMania is where we click into Chapter 3. And that road, the road to I'm the man, I'm the goalpost, I'm the one to beat, that to me is when that begins. But that's just the way that I see it. I do think, that Royal Rumble will be very telling for Jacob Fatu. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about the men's Royal Rumble match, okay? Because as we've talked about here on the pod, it's loaded, and it's only getting more loaded, okay? I'm going to go over some of the people, as well as I think I got my pick. People, and I love the question. I think it's a great question. I think it's an appropriate question. But people go, who do you think's going to win? That we love asking each other that this time of year. It's the best. I can't believe we're less than a week away at this point. So in the men's Rumble, first of all, people who aren't announced for the men's Rumble, I got to believe Jacob Fatu is going to be in this thing. And I don't see, there's the Iron Man spot and there's the Kane spot. / some people call it the Diesel spot. I don't know. I call it the Kane spot. Whatever. You know what the spot is. That's the ultra dominant spot. The Iron Man spot is Ric Flair, is Gunther from 2 years ago, is Ted DiBiase, I think Rick Martel 1 year. The Iron Man spot is the guy, Rey Mysterio won in the Iron Man spot. The Iron Man spot is the guy or girl that lasts the whole match. I think Jacob Fatu is in the Rumble, and I think he's in the Kane spot. I think Jacob Fatu comes out and eliminates, 11 people maybe. Jacob Fatu just clears out the ring, and then you get to a scenario where people have to come out, and Jacob Fatu, like Austin, that 1 year that he was sitting on the turnbuckle checking his fake watch, like who's next, and then Bret Hart comes out. And he does that iconic Austin face. I love that moment. I don't think Jacob Fatu is going to make that face, but I do think Solo Sikoa enters the Royal Rumble and eliminates Jacob. I think Royal Rumble begins the road to Solo versus Jacob, and that may be a WrestleMania match. Solo Sikoa versus Jacob Fatu. But I think Jacob comes out, eliminates a ton of people. Somebody else comes out. Jacob eliminates him. Somebody else comes out. Jacob eliminates him. Then Solo Sikoa comes out. Boom, 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 boom. Now they're going to blows. He doesn't eliminate Solo. Then a third person comes out. Ring starts to fill up again. Solo Sikoa finds a moment. Eliminates Jacob Fatu. He's furious. And then Solo Sikoa, of course, doesn't win the match. But I see that as a moment that's going to happen. I see the New Day being in this thing. But instead of, finally, we can get to a Rumble for Kofi's sake, where I don't think we're getting a Kofi spot, right? It wouldn't make sense this year. What I think instead that we'll probably get is a Kofi spot where he gets into the Rumble and the entire ring throws him out. And I don't know if it'll be him and Xavier at the same time, because that would take some correlation in the entrances. I almost feel like don't have Woods in the Rumble. Have him come to the ring with Kofi. Have him catch Kofi, but then drop him or whatever it is, But I think that the entire ring, if the locker room is mad at Kofi Kingston, the entire ring should eliminate Kofi. And then maybe Xavier comes back out, but it's during Jacob Fatu's reign of destruction or whatever. But I think we'll get a villainous New Day spot. I wouldn't be surprised if Logan Paul, at the time of this recording, he hasn't declared, but I wouldn't be surprised if on Monday Night Raw, Logan Paul declares. And Logan Paul enters the Royal Rumble. Logan Paul winning the Royal Rumble is absolutely a possibility. I don't think it'll happen. It's not my pick. But sure, it's a possibility. Logan Paul versus Gunther for the World Heavyweight Championship. It's absolutely possible. I don't think so, but it's possible. I think he'll get eliminated. I think Penta has got to be in the Rumble, right? The Rumble should be, and I've said this before, but the Rumble should be like a microcosm, like a display, a 60-minute window into what the current roster looks like. I love going back to old Rumbles and being like, yeah, this is what WWE looked like at the beginning of 92, at the beginning of 96, at the beginning of 02. Like, show me what the WWE looks like, especially now, as loaded as that Rumble is. Show me what the WWE looks like at the beginning of 2025. And Penta is an absolutely essential piece of that puzzle. He's a center square. So I definitely want to see Penta in the Rumble. In terms of surprises / returns, I don't know what AJ Styles' injury status is, but the Royal Rumble could be a great spot for AJ Styles to return. I think we've all been waiting on Randy Orton to return. I think Randy Orton could return and be a believable winner, because the minute Randy Orton returns, you heard on SmackDown this week, Cody Rhodes said, Randy Orton, I learned under Randy Orton. He referenced Randy. And I think there is this idea that we all want to see a Cody Rhodes-Randy Orton WrestleMania match. So the idea that Randy Orton wins the Royal Rumble and faces Cody Rhodes at the Showcase of the Immortals is certainly something to consider. Earlier, or I think late last week, Omos, who's been in Pro Wrestling Noah in Japan and has been absolutely tearing it up. I don't know if you guys have managed to catch any of it on YouTube or whatever, but look up Omos in Japan. He's been awesome. He's an awesome dude. He's an awesome talent. He's a spectacle. I would love for him to come back in this year's Rumble. And I think it might be time for him to be a babyface. Not a lovable guy, like still be a feared guy, but the idea that like there are villains that would have to answer to Omos, I would love to see him back. I think it's time. I want to see what he can do, and I think the Rumble would be a great place. Okay? Now, I think of all those surprises and people unannounced yet, Randy Orton is probably the one that I would say, okay, he's got the most need for a conversation that he might win the Rumble. I'm not sure that it's time to do Randy versus Cody yet. And, you know, maybe it doesn't happen at a WrestleMania. Maybe it's a SummerSlam. I want to see it. And you could do it. I mean, you've got time between Rumble and WrestleMania. I just, for whatever reason, I don't know that all those story beats have been told, and we haven't really gotten to the bottom of Randy Kevin yet. I think we got to look at who's been announced, right? I think a lot of people's pick is John Cena. And John Cena's a good pick. A big part of John Cena's story being back in 2025 is setting the record, winning that 17th World Championship, doing it at WrestleMania, getting back to the WrestleMania main event. Who doesn't want to see John Cena main event WrestleMania for the championship? The only reason why John Cena is not my pick to win the Royal Rumble is simple arithmetic. If John Cena wins the Royal Rumble, John Cena does not compete in an Elimination Chamber match. Unless you figure out some reason for him to do it. In my mind, the winner of the Elimination Chamber match will face the champion that the winner of the Royal Rumble is not facing. So, if John Cena wins the Royal Rumble, he's not in the Elimination Chamber match, which means that we've seen the last time that John Cena will be in a chamber match. He's made it clear. There is one men's chamber match this year. It's happening at the beginning of March, wherever, I think, I don't know, I don't remember where it is. Oh, in Canada. I want to see John Cena in that Elimination Chamber match. To get there, he's got to lose the Royal Rumble. And, you know, he in his promo on Netflix Raw, he said he's talking about not deserving the championship match. He's got to earn it. He wants to main event WrestleMania again. Extend that story for another month. Take us with that story to the chamber and give us a loaded-ass chamber match. You got plenty of people. I mean, if you say that the Elimination Chamber match, let's just say, depending on who wins the Rumble, but you could have a chamber match with Cena, with Punk, with Randy, with, you know, Drew McIntyre, with Seth Rollins. I mean, it could be an insane Logan Paul. It could be an insane chamber match. I want John Cena in the chamber match, and therefore, he shouldn't win the Royal Rumble. Okay, so who's next on that list? CM Punk. Everybody's talking about this. CM Punk is my pick to win. CM Punk is your pick to win. CM Punk is not my pick to win the Royal Rumble. And here's why. It's simple arithmetic. CM Punk entered the War Games match. Upon entering the War Games match, he said he was doing it with a favor in mind, a return favor from Paul Heyman in mind. He has once on Raw referenced the fact that that return favor will help him get to where he needs to go, and that's the main event of WrestleMania. He's already been pointing at that sign, even though the sign doesn't even exist yet. Punk needs to go to the main event of WrestleMania. That's the story that we're telling going forward. If Punk wins the Royal Rumble, number one, that story's over. He's like, okay, I won it. Now I'm going. And number two, he doesn't need the favor. I mean, you could say, well, not every person who wins the Royal Rumble main events. It just means they get the world title match. You know, I mean, who was it? Like Alberto Del Rio won the Royal Rumble, but he was in the opening match for WrestleMania because there's multiple champions. I understand. I get it. But for all intents and purposes, if CM Punk wins the Royal Rumble, the reason CM Punk is in the Royal Rumble is to get that championship match because presumably it will be the main event. That's the story that we're telling. So let's not get caught up in semantics. And what I'm saying is you don't introduce a loaded gun and have nobody get shot. You don't introduce the fact that CM Punk has a favor and then put CM Punk in a position where he doesn't need the favor. Then what was the point of any of it? So for that reason, as far as CM Punk winning the Royal Rumble, I'm out. I would love to see it. I'm out. Royal Rumble 2025 is 10 years removed from Roman Reigns getting booed out of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania after winning the Royal Rumble. The Rock looking all confused. It's also the first time in years that Roman Reigns has entered the Royal Rumble. It's hard to believe that Roman Reigns would not win the Royal Rumble. And it's possible that Roman Reigns wins the Royal Rumble. I think he's a lot of people's pick. For me, I would love to see Roman Reigns win the Royal Rumble. However, as much as Roman versus Cody 3 would be like, yeah, that's money. I'm down for Roman versus Cody 3. It's not. Roman versus Cody 1, we needed. Roman versus Cody 2, we needed. We told The Rock to his face, we need Roman versus Cody 2. Roman versus Cody 3, we're cool with. We don't need Roman versus Cody 3. It'd be great. We don't need it the way we needed the other two. We needed Cody Rhodes to win those back-to-back Royal Rumbles to get to that match. We don't need this match for Roman Reigns. As a matter of fact, we don't quite yet know what we need from Roman Reigns. Because what we needed from Roman Reigns was for him to get the Ulafala back from Solo Sikoa. And he got it. So as of now, if there was a path where you said, well, obviously the story dictates that Roman Reigns wins the Royal Rumble because he's going to WrestleMania to get this match so he can win that and go here, then it's like, yeah, Roman should win the Royal Rumble. But that is not a clear path. It's a path that's there, but it's a bit of a dirt road. Hasn't been paved yet. And because that path, to me, is not as clear as it should be, I think in my mind, it is more compelling to see what happens to Roman Reigns if he loses the Royal Rumble than if he wins the Royal Rumble. And for that reason, Roman Reigns isn't my pick either. This is how I went through the Royal Rumble this year, as of now, and this could change. But I more went through, all right, let's list these guys, and can I give you an explanation as to why they shouldn't win the Royal Rumble? And those three guys, Cena, Punk, and Roman, I can give you reasons why they should not win the Royal Rumble. And that's why they're not my pick. Sami Zayn is in the Royal Rumble, and I love that they carved a path for him by Kevin Owens going on Raw and saying, if you help me, I can help you. What do you say we headline WrestleMania together against each other? World Championship match. Does that sound like something that could interest you? And while, of course, it does, I don't see Kevin Owens beating Cody Rhodes for the title. Therefore, I don't see Sami Zayn winning the Royal Rumble. What I see is Kevin Owens versus Sami Zayn at WrestleMania, not for the championship. I can see a scenario where Kevin loses to Cody, and then Kevin costs Sami Zayn the Royal Rumble match later in the night. Like maybe the match before the Rumble, Kevin loses that ladder match. And then in the Rumble match itself, Kevin pulls a Hulk Hogan onto Sid Justice and eliminates Sami Zayn, or helps Sami Zayn to become eliminated. And therefore, you've also very cleanly gotten yourself out of the Kevin Owens and Cody Rhodes business. Cody Rhodes can move on to whatever's next easily after winning the ladder match. And Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn is the direction that you're headed in. And maybe on that road, you can do a Randy Orton, Kevin Owens match. Maybe you don't have to, but it's there. So no Sami Zayn. Rey Mysterio, I love it. I love that, again, they've brought up the fact that he's won before, that he's a Hall of Fame guy and everything. It's just, I don't see it for him. I love it. It's just not the year for it. You've got LA Knight, you got Shinsuke Nakamura, you got other people that either have been announced or could be in that thing, which will be great, but I don't see them winning the thing. You got Drew McIntyre. Drew McIntyre, for all intents and purposes, should win the Rumble. It should be a goal of his to win the Royal Rumble, right? I mean, he injured CM Punk last year on his way out of the Rumble, but this Drew McIntyre character, the baseline foundation, even before all the bloodline stuff, is that his moment was taken away from him. And his moment began at Royal Rumble 2020, winning the Royal Rumble 2020. In theory, the Drew McIntyre character should be trying to rebuild to that moment. It's been robbed from him so many times. It was robbed from him twice at Clash at the Castle. It was robbed from him at WrestleMania 36 because there was nobody in the building. He finally got back to it, and it was robbed from him at WrestleMania 40 because of CM Punk's interference and Damian Priest's Money in the Bank cash-in. Damian Priest could be in the Rumble too, by the way. So, of course, he's got to win to get back to WrestleMania 41 and get his moment back. But I don't think that's what's going to happen at WrestleMania 41. I don't see Drew McIntyre in a title match at WrestleMania 41. I think his CM Punk rivalry still feels too fresh. And I think his bloodline rivalry has barely even started. We're barely out of second gear in that bloodline rivalry. So I don't think winning the Royal Rumble moves you on to what's next. And if Roman Reigns were the champion, then maybe you could argue that Drew McIntyre could win the Royal Rumble, but Roman Reigns is in the Rumble. Now, I think we're going to get a great Drew McIntyre, Roman Reigns situation. And there's a lot of Roman Reigns situations that could be in that Rumble match. But I don't think Drew McIntyre is going to win. Seth Rollins. Seth Rollins would be a great pick to win the Royal Rumble. I think Seth Rollins is the low-key nucleus of so much of what's going on in the WWE right now. As I've said before, I think he's the most underrated superstar on the roster. I think that at some point he's going to get the flowers that he deserves. And I also think that Royal Rumble is not going to be when it is. Seth Rollins has lost too many big matches this year. He lost to Damian Priest. He got beat up by Bronson Reed. Lost to CM Punk. It's just, you can't go from all of that into, okay, well, now I'm going to win the world title. I just don't see it. I think he's going to have a prominent match at WrestleMania, but I don't think it's going to be the world title match. I don't think people are ready for it. And so that leaves me with only one person. That leaves me with my pick. This is not who I think, who I'd like. This is who I'd like to see win the Royal Rumble. The person that I'd like to see win the Royal Rumble is a person that needs to find a path back to the World Championship. And if he wasn't able to win it before, needs to at least tell the story of finding the opportunity to win it on the biggest stage possible. I want to see Jey Uso win the Royal Rumble. I don't know what else to tell you. And it didn't hit me until Saturday night's main event. It didn't hit me, honestly, until that near fall after the Uso splash. Maybe it's recency bias, but that near fall after the Uso splash left me thinking, How amazing would it be if Jey Uso won the Royal Rumble in Indianapolis? If he was the last man standing, if we're all sitting here talking about Punk and Roman and Cena and Drew and Seth, and it's Jey that wins the Royal Rumble. Now, I know I've been saying Cena versus Gunther is my match, and Cena versus Gunther is still the match I'd like to see. I want to see Gunther beat John Cena at WrestleMania, but now all of a sudden, the idea of Jey Uso being told, you got your shot, you blew it, it's over. And then Jey Uso wins the Royal Rumble. And we can tell a story through February, March, and the better part of April of Jey Uso having to build himself up to the biggest moment he's ever had, a world title match at WrestleMania. I want Jey Uso to get another crack at the World Heavyweight Championship. And I want to see him win the Royal Rumble. Maybe I'm crazy. Maybe I'm nuts. Maybe I just, got swept up in all the Saturday Night's Main Event gimmicks. But today, as I sit here with you, could change. Today, right now, I want Jey Uso to win the Royal Rumble. I don't know what else to tell you. I don't know what else you want me to tell you. If you'd excuse the interruption, are you looking for a perfectly balanced meal without all the counting and measuring? Well, Huel has you covered. Yeah, Huel is designed by experts to give you all the nutrition your body needs from a meal in one convenient drink that tastes like a milkshake. With these high-protein meals coming in at less than $5, it's a budget-friendly way to stick to your goals. It's also a time-friendly way. I can't tell you how many times I've been in a rush, I'm skipping meals, and Huel is there to literally save my life. Check out their Black Edition Ready to Drink 2. It's got 35 grams of protein plus 27 vitamins and minerals that'll fuel you for whatever you're up to. You can find Huel on Amazon. You can find them in GNC stores or directly at Huel.com. So take the leap and join the community of Hueligans with this exclusive offer for new customers of 15% off plus a free gift with the code NOTSAM at Huel.com. That's 15% off plus a free gift for new customers with code NOTSAM at Huel.com. I'll talk to you about the Women's Royal Rumble match, though, because the Women's Royal Rumble match is really being fleshed out. Some work went into everything going on with that. Now, I think there are some potential surprise returns as well. We know about one return coming in the Royal Rumble match, but is the Royal Rumble where we also see the return of Becky Lynch? Now, the original scenario that I had set up was Becky Lynch returning at Netflix Raw, coming out to the Royal Rumble as number 1, and then Charlotte with a surprise return at number 2. Obviously, that's not the scenario, and you could say, Sam, just reverse it, but I would consider reversing it had Charlotte already returned on TV. But the fact that this is Charlotte Flair's television return, the fact that we've seen the vignettes but have not seen her in the ring, it leads me to wanting Charlotte Flair to be number 1 in the Royal Rumble this year, but I do not want Becky Lynch to be in that number 2 spot because it would instantly take all of that away from Charlotte Flair. Now the story is it's Becky Lynch's return because we didn't know that was going to happen. I think instead having Charlotte Flair start at number 1 and then whoever it is, it could be Bianca Belair, it could be whoever, anybody else on the current roster coming out, and Charlotte Flair now has to test herself, who hasn't been on television in well over a year, has to test herself against one of the finest in the women's division currently, and one of the finest in the women's division currently has to test herself against Charlotte Flair for 2 minutes or a minute and a half before the next person comes out. That's how I would like this match to start. Now, I still think that Becky Lynch could come back. But if Charlotte Flair comes out at number 1 and Becky Lynch comes out at number 15, number 20, number 25, then I think safe. All good, no problem. And then we can still get some physicality between Becky Lynch and Charlotte. Maybe we got some Alexa Bliss action. Maybe this is when Alexa Bliss returns. Maybe this is when Asuka returns. I don't know. I don't know what the status of these people is. But everybody that's floating out there right now, you at least got to consider we may see them in the Rumble. I think there is an assumption, right, with Charlotte Flair returning that she's going to be everybody's pick. That, well, Charlotte Flair's back and she's in the Rumble, that means Charlotte Flair's going to win the Rumble. That's not for me. That's not my pick. And I'll tell you why. I love Charlotte Flair. I think she will be in one of the women's championship matches at WrestleMania. My personal preference would be to see Charlotte Flair and Tiffany Stratton compete for the WWE Women's Championship. But I think that there is such a stigma around Charlotte Flair, and it's like, well, Charlotte Flair just shows up and says, I want a title match and gets a title match. That I don't think it should be as easy as Charlotte Flair returns and wins the Royal Rumble. I don't think that will have the effect that you want it to have. Instead, what I think we want is Charlotte Flair getting eliminated from the Rumble, Charlotte Flair having to have some television matches, and then Charlotte Flair having to go into the Elimination Chamber and really earn it, right? Because in the Royal Rumble, you survive. You can get lucky. You can catch a couple people slipping. Just don't get thrown over the top rope. That's all you got to do to win the Royal Rumble. In the Elimination Chamber, you have to beat people. And you have to not get beaten. That's the position that I want to see Charlotte Flair in. I want to see Charlotte Flair beating people and putting the work in to not get beaten herself. And in that respect, I think the Elimination Chamber becomes much more the spot for Charlotte Flair to win than the Royal Rumble, but I could be mad. Liv Morgan is in. Raquel Rodriguez is in. Now, I feel like those two cancel each other out. First of all, Liv Morgan jumping right back into the championship picture. I think we've put a bow on the Rhea Ripley-Liv Morgan story. The last thing we want to do is jump right back into it. So I don't see Liv Morgan winning this year. And if anything, maybe there's some communication errors between Liv Morgan and Raquel Rodriguez where things go wrong. I don't think that it's necessarily time to split the two of them up, but it could be something that you did, right? I don't know. I think Bayley and Raquel, by the way, may get that Kane spot that I have reserved for Jacob Fatu in the men's match. I think, Bayley would be a good number 2 person. Bayley would be a good second person to come out against Charlotte Flair, because the idea that you have 2 of the original 4 horsewomen in there, and it's not Becky Lynch, it's Bayley, the one who has arguably had to work harder than any of them. Bayley was the 4 horsewomen, the member of the 4 horsewomen that got left behind in NXT. Bayley was the one that had to prove it a little more. Bayley was the one that it took a little bit more time to get to the spot where she was in that same category as the other 3. The idea that Bayley has not only done that, but gone above and beyond, puts it into a different perspective. And the idea of starting that match with Bayley and Charlotte is very, very intriguing to me. And the idea of Bayley being in that Iron Woman spot is intriguing. I don't think she'll get another win for the Royal Rumble this year, but I do think she'll have a great performance. Nia Jax is always a great spoiler. But then I think there's always just she's such a good villain. She's such a good heel that people are going to want to see her get eliminated. And that will be a great reaction, and I think we'll see it. I really think right now, if I had to pick, based on the names that have been announced, I think Bianca Belair might be a good pick to win the Royal Rumble this year. And the reason that I think Bianca Belair is a good pick is because for basically the entire last year, Bianca Belair has been in this tag team situation with either Jade Cargill or Naomi. And that's great. But I feel like the emphasis on Bianca Belair as a singles superstar, as a dominant championship contender, has kind of been something that hasn't really been talked about like it used to be. And I think it should be. So I think that it would be a great way to remind people, oh, the minute Bianca Belair wants to step back into singles matches, she's an ultimate in consideration for a championship match. And the idea that Bianca Belair wins the Royal Rumble and reminds everybody, I think could be good. So I think right now, Bianca Belair is probably my pick. I think even more so in the men's division, even more so than, I should say, in the men's division. In the women's division, you got to think about the NXT call-ups. You got to think about if the Roxanne Perez Bailey situation is going to be paid off at all in the Royal Rumble. If Roxanne is going to enter the Rumble again, I believe she has before, and get her hands on Bailey. What about all the international women that have been brought into NXT, the superstars that have been brought over there? The Zarias, the Julias, the Stephanie Vaquers. I would love to see any or all of them in the Rumble. I think Zarya, the Rumble is built for. Talk about TNA. We didn't really even talk about this in the men's Rumble. But, does Jordynne Grace enter the Rumble this year? This time not as a TNA superstar, but as a WWE superstar. Who knows? We had, speaking of exciting moments from women, Timeless Toni Storm returns on AEW on Collision this week. Timeless Toni Storm returned. And this is, Toni Storm, really, nobody has proven themselves as an all-around performer and just a quadruple threat more than Toni Storm has. Toni Storm, you talk about okay, we're going to give you a little something and I'm going to go all the way with this. Toni Storm is a shining example of that, where no matter where you stand in tribalism, no matter what show you like to watch on a Monday or a Tuesday or a Wednesday or a Saturday or a Friday, to sit there and say that the stuff that Toni Storm has been doing is not awesome, it's just a dishonest perspective from any real wrestling fan, in my opinion. I haven't met anybody that's sitting there and going no, the Toni Storm stuff is no good. Toni Storm stuff has been great. And I think it confused a lot of people when she came back after her run as Timeless Toni and went back to debut Toni. And the only criticism that I really had for it was I liked the amnesia thing. I thought it was great. And the idea to perform and go back to the OG Toni Storm and everything and have forgotten the last couple of years. The only thing I didn't love was everybody playing along with it, right? Just because she thinks she should be booked on Collision or Rampage or whatever doesn't mean that she should be, but whatever. That's literally nitpicking. I think that it as you just let it breathe and play itself out, it was awesome. And on Collision this week, Mariah May slams her down, and Toni looks up and starts talking like Timeless Toni again, and she says, they say the hardest role you'll ever play is to play yourself. And Toni gets up, and she pulls off her baseball cap, and now instead of that flat iron straight hair, she's got the old school curls. You realize the makeup is starting to smear. She rips off her shirt. She's got the old school brassiere on. She rips off her UFO pants. She's got those high-waisted undergarments and fishnets on. Timeless Toni is back. And my interpretation of this was that Timeless Toni, as an old-school movie star, has been acting this entire time. The whole time she was playing old-school Toni, that's exactly what she was doing. She was playing old-school Toni, only to lure Mariah May into a trap of false confidence that would end in Australia when this match finally happens between the two of them. Now, it could be that when she got slammed, her head, it jostled back in and she found herself again as Timeless Toni. But the way I interpreted it was Timeless Toni has been acting this entire time. Either way, I think it works and I love it. But I like my version. I'm just enjoying for myself right now. And I think it's smart that they did this before the Australia show, because now you go into the Australia show knowing it's not Toni Storm Classic. It's Timeless Toni versus Mariah May, because that's the match that everybody wants to see. So yeah, I thought it was well played. I think the Toni Storm stuff has just all been so great and such a fun addition to that show. And now I'm excited about the match. I think it's going to be great. Let me know what you guys think. Okay, let's check these emails, huh? My email address is notsamwrestling@gmail.com. That's notsamwrestling@gmail.com. Okay. We're going to Martin here says, I love you, Sam. Hang on, we're not doing the that's it. We're not doing that anymore. Now we're doing this. Fatu! Thank you for gracing us with the greatest podcast of all podcasts. That's true. This is his Mania card. This is for Martin, WrestleMania 41. Cody versus Punk. Cody wins. Okay, I mean, I'd love Cody versus Punk. It's not mine, obviously, but I'd love Gunther versus Cena. Gunther wins. You got both champions retaining. Okay. Tiffany versus Charlotte. Tiffany wins. That's 3 champions retaining. Rhea versus Io. Any can win, but I'd love it to be Io. Okay. I don't think you've thought. Are you thinking about this, or are you just like, here's some things I'd like to see that would be fun just for me and only me? Braun versus Sheamus. Career versus title. Sheamus wins. Becky versus Liv. He didn't write who wins on that one. I feel like you didn't. Like, listen, I put a lot of thought into my podcast. I don't want you guys just writing emails sent. Like, think. You know, you got to really think about it first. I appreciate the email, but you got to think. Matt writes in, serious question. Out of these performers, who do you think had the best butt gimmick? Okay. Rikishi, stink face. Billy Gunn, literally Mr. Ass. Stacy Keibler, ring entrance, hubba hubba. Yokozuna, bonsai drop. Doink, whoopee cushion. Scott Steiner, big bad booty daddy. Okay, this is good. So I'm going to take some people out right now. Stacy Keibler, ring entrance was amazing, but the legs were more the focus than the butt gimmick. It was, you know, she's got legs, ZZ Top. It was more for, I believe, leg focused for Stacy Keibler. So I'm going to take her out. Doink, whoopee cushion. It was great, but, you know, not even his strongest move. Not his finisher in every match. You know, I think it was more just because of the whoopee cushion pun. I'm going to take that out. Okay, Scott Steiner, big bad booty dude, daddy, I'm keeping. Yokozuna, bonsai drop. Yeah, Rob Bartlett said he had an ass like an amphitheater. I'm going to keep him in. Billy Gunn, literally Mr. Ass. He was literally Mr. Look, I think ultimately, here's the answer. When I say pro wrestling butts, the first thing you think of is Rikishi. The first thing you think of is a stink face. The stink face was a move that revolutionized butts in pro wrestling. More so than the bonsai drop, more so than Mr. Ass, more so than any of it. Billy Gunn might have been able to take this had it not been for Rikishi, but I don't think anything's beating the stink face. All right, Garrett sent me a PowerPoint here. First-time emailer, and I wanted your thoughts on this Royal Rumble wild speculation. Now, I do appreciate this. I like wild speculation about what's coming up this week, as opposed to like, hey, what do you think is going to happen in 4 months? Like, okay. Royal Rumble wild speculation. We get perhaps Punk, Seth, Cena, and Reigns as the final 4, okay? Number 30 out 5 to 7 minutes ago. Yeah, I mean, you're overthinking it now. Okay, I don't need to know the time. Roman Reigns eliminates Cena as the final elimination. He's exhausted, so Roman wins, okay? His music is blaring, the wise man is glowing and shouting admiration as he starts to walk up the ring steps. Then the countdown starts again, which confuses everyone because all 30 have entered the Rumble and Roman has won the match. Roman has a quizzical look on his face. He asks the wise man about this, and the wise man says, I don't know, my tribal chief. Nervousness is all over his face. And then he sent me pictures of the 2 faces. The countdown hits, 31, we get the final boss. The Rock comes down, takes advantage of a worn-out tribal chief to win the Rumble. Then this leads to build segment. No, you know, I mean, I don't think that's the way you do that. You know, it's just very like, we just spent 60 minutes investing in this whole story only for The Rock to come out at the very end and eliminate Roman Reigns. It could happen, but no, I mean, that doesn't really work for me. Daniel writes in, hail to the original and only podcast tribal chief. Fatu! Is there, since you're the OPTC, is there a podcast high chief? I'm also the podcast high chief. It's not like, yeah, there's nobody above. I'm also the podcast high chief. Who's your wise man? Hot dog. And do you have a right-hand man or woman of your tribe? Yeah, I would assume it's Megan. Yeah, Megan can be the right-hand man. Megan's my Jimmy Uso. Because Jimmy was a little, like, Jimmy and Roman stuck together. Yeah, I would say Hot Dog can be my Heyman in the sense that he's not necessarily there to advise me, but to serve me. And Megan can be Jimmy. Yes, for sure. Megan Morant is my Jimmy Uso. Love the pod. Can't wait to hear your thoughts and analysis each and every week. Been listening since right before SummerSlam 23 and appreciate your 3 rules. Last question. How high is Jacob Fatu's ceiling? Oh, thank God the question changed directions. Could he be another Roman Reigns? Well, I think I've answered that, right? I think I've told you we're going to see this year between WrestleMania 41 and 42 is going to answer that question for us. Andy writes in, hey, Sam, great work with the new iteration of the SiriusXM show and, as always, the wrestling content. Thank you very much, Andy. Lots going on right now. I had a random dumb question. When you're doing the post-show emergency podcast with Megan, did you guys just hang at your place and watch? If so, there's something endearing about you hanging out with your coworkers off the clock and watching some WWE. You're going to talk about it anyway. You might as well give us some great content too. Yes. Yes. When you see the instant reaction shows in the Not Sam studio, yes, Megan and I have been sitting in the living room with my wife and for sometimes the first half of the show with the kids, watching the pay-per-view. We order food. We watch the premium live event. I'm writing things down in my little notebook. We're talking, but we're not trying to talk too much because we want to save our reactions for each other. We're having a great time. Walk right downstairs, hit record, and let our feelings out. Great question. That's exactly, yeah. That's how you pull the curtain back. That's exactly what's happening. Let's go to David. With the new TNA NXT alliance, where would a winner take all the gold match fit on your card? Fraxium versus the Hardys. If you're ever in Barcelona, wanted to share some fine wine and great tapas and talk wrestling, let me know. Thank you very much, David. With the new team, where would a winner take all the gold match fit on your card for Fraxium versus the Hardys? I think if you're asking when and where would I do that match, I think it could be a lot of fun to do a match like that at Stand and Deliver. NXT Stand and Deliver, that's the, WrestleMania weekend NXT Premium Live event. I think the idea of bringing in a little bit of TNA talent for that and having the Hardys come out at Stand and Deliver, I think that would be a perfect thing. I think it would elevate the whole show. I think it'd be really, really cool. So that's probably what I would do. And who knows, with this TNA partnership, maybe we get Manser. Did you guys watch the Mance Warner interview that was here on Not Sam Wrestling just a few days ago? He's amazing. Even if you don't know who the guy is, Mance Warner, listen or watch the interview or both. It's great. Let's go to a different one. Let's go to James. James says, I'm at work, so we'll keep it quick. Look, I'm not your autobiographer, James. Jay was wearing the exact same necklace as Jacob Fatu, only in white. Fatu going off with the 17 moonsaults would have been cooler if they hadn't done the same thing with Bronson Reed a few months ago. Okay, listen, James. You need to understand that sometimes you got to listen to the audience. You can hear the sound that they're making. If you have your TV and you have the volume on, you can hear the sounds that are surrounding the ring. Those are the people watching the show. You can then go online and look at the way people are responding to said actions. For you to say, it would have been cooler, but, here's what would be an okay thing to say, in my opinion. I kind of felt a little weird about it because it felt similar to what Bronson Reed had done. Instead of saying it would have been cooler. Because now you're saying that the reaction would have been better. When in reality, how could the reaction have been better? The reaction was exactly what anybody would have wanted the reaction to be. So don't go, it wasn't that great. You didn't like it that much. That's fine. That's your preference. I'll never tell you how to feel. But for you to then take how you feel and put it on the thing as if it is the truth and perception of it is not fair and ridiculous. Production sound issues are becoming frustratingly normal. What? Tonight, the broadcast began with several minutes of both. Okay, look, Jacob Fatu is definitely the active wrestler. James, listen. If you are watching WWE right now, and you are a wrestling fan, if you are not a wrestling fan, and you turn on WWE and you're like, I don't like this show, that's fine. If you are a WWE fan, even if you're a wrestling fan but never were a WWE fan, if you're still not a WWE fan, that's fine. if you're a WWE fan and you're watching the product right now and going like, this isn't very good, you won't be pleased. You won't be pleased. There's something else in your life that you have to figure out where like you are just in a position where you are more comfortable disliking things than you are liking things. And therefore, you're going to look for whatever negative you can find in anything. And that's the way you're going to live your life. And that's fine. But quite frankly, if that's the way you're living your life, I have no idea what you're getting out of this podcast. You're free to live your life that way and have those opinions. But if that's the way that you're taking content in, I don't have a clue what you're getting out of this show. I appreciate you listening. I'd love for you to keep listening. I don't want you to go away. But I'm befuddled. That's all I'm saying. Simone writes in from Belgium. Hope you and the fam are doing great. We're doing incredibly. I wanted to wish you good luck for Rumble Week and ask you 2 questions. What does it say of WWE's opinion of Braun Strowman that he was the first singles match for Jacob? Would love to see them go at it again. I think that there's a clear reason why it was Braun Strowman, and Braun Strowman was a great choice. 2, to follow one of your famous what ifs. What if the Bloodline story is the Jey Uso story and it culminates at the Royal Rumble with him winning by last eliminating Roman Reigns? The crowd would go bananas, I think. It's a shame I won't be able to catch you in Indy, but when Mania will come to Europe. Okay, well, I appreciate you, buddy. The Bloodline story is the Bloodline story. The Bloodline story is not a story about one person. The Bloodline story is Paul Heyman's story. The Bloodline story is Roman Reigns' story. The Bloodline story is Jey Uso's story. The Bloodline story may be Big Jim's story. The Bloodline story is Sami Zayn's story. The Bloodline story is Jacob Fatu's story. The Bloodline story is Solo Sikoa's story. The Bloodline story is now Kevin Owens' story. The Bloodline story is Cody Rhodes' story. The Bloodline story is Seth Rollins' story. The Bloodline story is everyone's story. There is no, what if ultimately this is who the story is about? It's about everyone. It's been fueling everything. The Bloodline story is Drew McIntyre's story. That's why I say there has never been a story like the Bloodline story. You go through all these different characters who have all different reasons for being, who are all after different things, have different goals, are now in different places. And what does it all boil back down to? The Bloodline. The Bloodline is becoming CM Punk's story. The Bloodline is Brock Lesnar's story. The Bloodline is the story that has fueled everything. So yes, is the Bloodline Jey Uso's story? Of course the Bloodline is Jey Uso's story. It made Jey Uso into who he is today. But the Bloodline story also made Roman Reigns into who he is today. Do you understand that Roman Reigns went from some guy that corporate wants to make champion that's never going to work into the biggest star in the industry? That's the Bloodline. If Cody Rhodes comes back and he doesn't have the Bloodline to fight against, is it the same? If Cody Rhodes doesn't team with the Bloodline, leading to Kevin Owens feeling betrayed, is it the same? You know, Seth Rollins passed with the Shield, of course, now intertwining with the Bloodline. Everything. The Rock's story is the Bloodline story. It's everyone and everything. Let's go to Micah. Crazy idea. But in fairness, you did spark it with one of your past episodes. You brought up last month the idea of Shawn Michaels possibly having one last match. Oh, I want it. Well, after Saturday night's main event, what if they did Shawn Michaels versus Kevin Owens at WrestleMania this year? What if they did that? Oh, I don't know. I would absolutely love and adore it. If they did Shawn Michaels versus Kevin Owens, yes, I would think it would be amazing. Yeah, I think it would be great to have a Shawn Michaels-Kevin Owens match. You could run it back exactly how you did the Stone Cold match. And you could even have Shawn Michaels wear his SummerSlam 02 gear. You could have Shawn Michaels come out in jeans, cowboy boots, white tank top. Okay? Let's forget about that tag match that we will never talk about. Let's say, oh, for the first time since whenever, since the Undertaker match at WrestleMania, what was it, 26? Sean's back. Let's run it back to 02. Let's put him in a tank top. Let's put him in jeans. Throw a Bible verse on the front of it. Put some cowboy boots on. Bring back Shawn Michaels for one more match with Kevin Owens. All over it. All over it. All right, this is the last one. It's from Doug. Ones to the sky for my OPTC. I love you, Sam, not Sam. Fatu! So imagine with me, if you will, we're roughly halfway through the Rumble. Roar! Here comes Strowman, monster, marching to the ring, steps in the ring, and tosses out like 4 or 5 guys, one of which was someone big and pissed, possibly Drew McIntyre, who then pulls Strowman out under the bottom rope. They battle outside the ring. Next entry, Jacob Fatu slides in the ring and eliminates 4 or 5 guys. Meanwhile, Strowman has finished with Drew, gets back in the ring with just him and Fatu for that epic 1v1 moment in the Rumble. Yeah, I mean, I don't think Braun Strowman, Jacob Fatu, it'd be fun for them to meet again at some point, but I don't think Braun versus Jacob is that thing. I don't think it's got like, oh, we're going to keep going with this thing. Like, that's the introduction of Jacob to me. I'm going to do one more. Jeremy writes in, I acknowledge you, my podcast tribal chief. We know that everything counts. So if Cody loses to KO, then enters the Rumble to try to become the first three-peat winner, just thought, what do you think? No, I think if Cody lost to KO, it would be out of character for Cody to then enter the Royal Rumble. If Cody entered the Royal Rumble, to me, it wouldn't be that much different than The Rock coming in and trying to, quote-unquote, take Cody's WrestleMania match from him. You know, if Cody lost in that ladder match fair and square, unless there was some extenuating circumstance, entering the Royal Rumble after losing the ladder match would be a Kevin Owens move, but not a Cody Rhodes move. He's got too much honor. But then again, there is no honor amongst thieves. Name that tune. Hope you guys are going to be with me in Indianapolis Thursday. That's the 31st of January. You can get tickets at notsam.com. Lyra Valkyria is going to be a part of the live Not Sam Wrestling podcast at the Helium Comedy Club in Indianapolis, Indiana. It's going to be a blast. See you soon. Have a good one, everybody.